Venezuelan migrants who were sent to the CECOT maximum security prison in El Salvador. NBC News reports there are now at least 14 instances of their individual cases being dismissed, raising questions about whether they'd ever be allowed to return to the United States.
Let's bring in right now the reporter on this story, NBC News correspondent David Noriega. You know, David, we've all seen news reports about Abrego Garcia. That has filled the news, obviously, for the past several months. Actually, the majority of Americans believe he should be returned, but that's always sort of left behind the hundreds that were also sent down there under questionable circumstances. Where did those cases sit right now?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Joe. So I found out that this was happening, that these asylum cases were being dismissed, because I've been following closely the case of one of the Venezuelan men who was sent to the CECOT mega prison in El Salvador. His name is André Hernandez Romero. It's a fairly well-known case. He's a gay man who worked as a makeup artist for a state TV station in Caracas in Venezuela. He came to the United States because he told his lawyers that he was suffering persecution for his sexual orientation and for his opposition to the Maduro government in Venezuela. So he was detained at an ICE detention facility in San Diego and was pursuing his asylum claim. There was supposed to be a hearing in that case this week on Wednesday, but the judge at the very last minute dismissed the case, canceled the hearing, basically threw the case out. Now, here's why this matters, right? What's at the core of this story is due process, as we've talked about before. And when we talk about due process in these cases, often what we're talking about are these pending cases in immigration court that many of these men, the majority of these men, had before they were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. In Hernandez's case, for example, the way his lawyers found out he had been removed to El Salvador was because he simply didn't show up to immigration court one day. And so they investigated, figured out that he was likely one of these people who was sent to the mega prison. So the lawyers and lawyers around the country did this when they figured out this had happened with their clients. They scrambled to keep these immigration court cases open, basically as a way of preserving the vestiges of due process while, the bigger picture worked its way through the federal courts. The legality of these deportations was assessed by the federal court system. And for a while, the immigration courts, the immigration judges went along with it. They continued these cases, they kept them open. But that started changing in just the last couple of weeks. As the government has been moving to dismiss these cases, more and more immigration judges, because the asylum seekers in the cases are absent, are agreeing and dismissing the cases. So I should say that I reached out to the relevant government agencies, to DHS and DOJ, who, in various ways are involved in the immigration court proceedings for this story. Didn't hear back. I'm going to keep pressing them for answers on this. But I have been talking to the families and lawyers of some of these men. The families, on the one hand, are devastated. Hernandez's family, for example, told me that his asylum case, keeping it open, was a beacon of hope for them. That is now closed. And the lawyers in particular say that the fact that these cases are being dismissed means that these men are essentially being disappeared from the American legal system. In the words of one lawyer, their concern is that the government here is trying to pretend that they were never here in the United States legally seeking asylum in the first place. Back to you guys.
Claire McCaskill.
Yeah, David, I am curious if there has been any effort to look at all of these cases and try to figure out what percentage of the folks actually have criminal records. We had a case in Missouri that splashed onto the New York Times this week. A woman named Carol, who overstayed a tourist visa from Hong Kong, been in this small community in the Boot Hill of Missouri for 20 years, working as a waitress, beloved in this community, bought a home, have children, and she's missing she went to an appointment, and of course they locked her up. And the people in this small town are outraged. They all voted for Trump. 80% of the folks in this town of 10,000 in the Boot Hill voted for Trump, but they're going, wait a minute, we didn't sign up to deport moms. We signed up to deport criminals. Do we have any idea what percentage of the folks they have disappeared or removed from the country actually have criminal records or verified criminal activity?
Part of the problem is that these flights happened with virtually no transparency whatsoever. The government actually has not even in any court setting acknowledged or recognized or given out the names of the people who were deported to this mega prison. So everything that we know because we are individually investigating these cases. However, I can tell you that there are ongoing efforts by lawyers, by the press, including NBC News, to essentially build a comprehensive view of who the men were who were deported under the Alien Enemies Act, who had these ongoing pending legal immigration court cases. And what everyone is finding is that the majority did not have criminal records of any kind, either in the United States or in the various countries that they lived in prior to coming to the United States. I personally have investigated several cases that fall under that description and have spoken to their families and their lawyers. In a lot of these cases, the pattern that we're seeing is that these are men who were often flagged by immigration authorities, either when they crossed the border or flew in to an airport, or when they came into contact with law enforcement in one way or another because of their tattoos, right? There is this sort of view in federal law enforcement that tattoos are an indication of belonging to Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang specifically. That was the case with Andre Hernandez, the case that I was just telling you about. He has 2 tattoos on his wrists of crowns. Now, this is a very complicated issue. I've spoken to law enforcement experts, other experts who say that Tren de Aragua does not use tattoos as markers of belonging to the gang. Sometimes they use tattoos, sometimes they don't. Tattoos alone cannot function as evidence that someone belongs to this particular criminal organization. And nevertheless, that is what appears to have caused a lot of these men to get swept up in this operation. But I want to stress, part of the problem here is that there is no transparency around these deportations whatsoever in any context, either to the press or to the federal judiciary.
We thank you for continuing to dig into this. NBC News correspondent David Noriega, we look forward to more of your reporting. Thank you for coming on this morning. And Claire McCaskill, thank you.